welcome everyone to the first of the Sizzling Summer Speaker Series events. And I would ask that you please put yourself on mute and that you pose any questions through the chat. That way we won't get any extraneous sounds. Now, for anyone that doesn't know what this is, what we've done is 3 chapters of Sisters in Crime in San Diego, Orange County, and LA. We have banded together to do collegial events of speakers, different authors throughout the summer. And this is the first of 3 we've got scheduled so far. They will all be virtual. And each of our chapters is going to moderate one of these events. I'm from San Diego, so I will be moderating this first event. We are also highlighting a local bookstore, which I'll talk about in a moment. LA will be the next event, and then Orange County after that. But what we do hope is that you will, this is open to the public, and we hope you will consider joining one of our chapters for fans and writers of crime fiction. And you can do that going to our websites or our Facebook and signing up there, or you can leave your email on our chat here, and we will contact you about future events, and you'll have the information you need if you decide to sign up. So please leave your email here if you can. And if you'd like to join a chapter, indicate which chapter you'd like to join. You get a lot of benefits. Each of us has a newsletter. There are chapter-only events. There's national events. There's national content you have access to. You get access to this recordings. So, for instance, this event is being recorded. And plus, you're part of a community of writers and fans of crime fiction. So we have to support each other. I am the president of the San Diego Sisters in Crime chapter. We call ourselves Partners in Crime. And I've been in that position since January. We're active, obviously, in the San Diego area, and we just published an anthology of short stories. It's called Crossing Borders. You get the theme, crossing physical borders as well as psychological borders. And one of our authors today, Matt Coyle, helped edit the book. He was one of the 2 editors that chose and edited the short stories. So we hope you will go to Mysterious Galaxy or another bookstore and buy the book. The local bookstore we are highlighting today is Mysterious Galaxy. And we've had a long time relationship with them. They've always supported our chapter, and they've supported local writers just very well over the years. We are putting up their link on the chat. So if you go to that link, it will take you right to the books that we'll be talking about today, and you can order them. And please order other books from them as well. So they're one of many bookstores that support us here in San Diego area, but we've had a long time relationship with them. Okay, so future events. On Sunday, July 11th, we will be having Heather Graham speaking to us. Heather, as a writer, just always amazes me. She has written over 200 books and novellas. It's just unimaginable, but she has gotten all kinds of awards. She's a bestseller author. She's done several series. And she's gotten lifetime achievement, not only for thriller writing, but for romance writing as well. So she will be joining us on Sunday, July 11th at 3 o'clock. On Sunday, August 22nd at 4 o'clock, we will be giving a shout out to our friends from the East Coast. And we'll be having a panel, a mystery tasting panel. What's your flavor of mystery? And 3 authors from the East Coast. They will be Ed Amar. He's done a number of thrillers, very active in international thriller writers, Noir at the Bar. Tara Liskowski, who writes gothic suspense and short stories. She's run an Agatha, an Anthony, and a McCavity, so she's doing very well. And then finally, Alma Katsu, who writes in all kinds of genres: horror, spy, historical, and she has also won a number of awards. So that will be on Sunday, August 22nd at 4 p.m. So please put that on your calendar. And today we have our Mystery Across the Pond event, and we're really delighted to welcome two very fine authors. We're going to look at how mystery differs from different sides of the ocean. Matt Coyle is in San Diego, and Andrea Carter is from Dublin. And Andrea, it's now almost, it is 11 o'clock there now, I believe.
Yes, it is. It's after 11. Yep.
After 11. So we have to give a special thanks to her, but us people in California, it has just gone dark in Dublin, where she is, at 11 o'clock. So this event will be recorded. You'll be able to listen to it on the different it'll be posted at the different chapters, and you can listen to it there. So first, let me tell you a little bit about Matt Coyle. Matt is the author of the best-selling Rick Cahill crime novels. His books have won the Anthony, the San Diego Book Award, the Seamus, the Lefty, the Ben Franklin Award. Have I missed any, Matt?
The Ben Franklin was only a silver, so that doesn't really count.
Oh, okay. So he's done very well. We'll be talking about the latest, which is Blind Vision. And Jefferson Parker called it a visceral tour de force of the PI tradition. And when we begin talking about it, you'll see exactly what he means by a visceral tour de force. I won't spoil the surprise. It's his seventh book in the series. And so we'll be talking about that one. You've got another one in the works, I think, Matt.
That's right. Last Redemption comes out November 30th.
Great. So Andrea Carter is the author of the Inishowen Mysteries, which are published in the UK, Germany, and the US. The Sunday Times said that Carter excels in recreating the cloistered, gossipy confines of a small Irish village. The Inishowen community where everybody knows everybody else's business. And I've read both books, and that's certainly the case. You'll enjoy it. Some have compared her work to Agatha Christie. She's won the Irish Writers' Centre Novel Fair, Arts Council of Ireland, and the Dublin Council Awards. And she's got the really exciting news that her series is being adapted for TV, and it's going to be called Donegal, the Inishowen Mysteries. Any word as to when that will come out, Andrea?
Well, firstly, it's Donegal. You pronounced Inishowen perfectly, but Donegal is Donegal, County Donegal.
Okay.
But yes, there's in typical form, when something is in development for television, there's a flurry of activity, and then a slowdown, and then a flurry of activity, and then a slowdown. And with the present worldwide problem that we're all facing, everything is slow. So I couldn't tell you. I think I'll believe it myself when I see it on screen, you know. But it's things are happening and scripts are being written.
Good. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed and keep buying your books.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Andrea is a former solicitor, which means lawyer for us Americans. And her books are full of Irish legal tidbits. And we'll be talking about today The Well of Ice. It's her third in the series. And Death at Graysbridge is also out. So I have read both books. They're really well done, both of them. I encourage everyone to read them. And one of the nice things is that you don't have to have read the whole series in order to enjoy these books. They both stand alone very well. So with that, I want to start it off with a question for both of you. Maybe we can start it off with you, Matt, and then Andrea, you can answer the same question. Tell us about your writer's journey. What did you do before, and are you writing full time? The saga of the first publication. And we're going to be particularly interested in how this differs from the way it goes in Ireland.
I thought this was only an hour.
in a few minutes.
It took me 10 years to go from floppy disk on a used IBM ThinkPad to publication. I'm pretty sure it was about 10 years. Knew I wanted to be a writer from when I was a kid. Didn't realize you have to write to actually become a writer. That took me about 30 years to figure out. But once I started, I took some writing classes taught by Carolyn Wheat, who probably many people on the screen know, at UCSD Extension. And I thought I'd written a book. I wrote a first draft, and I wrote it in what I call a cocoon. I was unemployed at the time, and I finally was doing what I thought I should be doing with my life. I was 42 or 3. It took me that long, and I didn't know anything about the writing business. I knew a little bit about agents, that you had to get one, but I didn't really know how it all worked. And I'd never heard of a writers group. I wrote the first draft, like I say, in a cocoon at home alone, every day revising what I wrote the day before and thinking that it's pretty genius. I'm going to have a book deal when I'm done, never have a day job again, and life will change. And luckily, a guy I used to work with in the golf business called me a week after I'd finished the first draft, which I thought was a book. And he said, "Hey, I got a job over here in the sports licensing business. Do you want to come work? I know you're out of work." I said, "Well, Eric, I'm going to be a writer. Pretty soon this book will be sold, and I'll buy the house in La Jolla, and I'm not going to have a day job ever again, but I'll come over and help you for a few months." And I worked there for 16 years. Quit 2 years ago, right, full time, 2.5 now. Not because I was making enough money, just because I had some saved up and it was time. But it's a long, arduous journey for anybody. I think anybody knows that. I was in sales for many years, so I knew about no's, rejections. Of course, they weren't personal; they were more about the company, its product, than me. But you have to learn. That's a very good background for becoming a writer, because there's so much rejection along the way. Probably not for Andrea, but for the rest of us. So you have to kind of build off. You have to find some sort of progress in your journey. So when you get a good rejection where they actually liked your writing, but the story wasn't right for them, rather, you kind of have to put that in the plus column. Well, they think I can write, but this just isn't their story. So I did that for I probably sent out and then stopped and revised probably 3 or 4 times over, I'd say 3 or 4 years, after it took me those many years to get the first draft done. And I didn't want to be the guy who was writing the same book over and over again, which is what I was doing. And I remember I got a rejection from Betsy Amster in LA, and we had a little back and forth email. She's very sweet. And she said, "Don't be discouraged. It took Jonathan Kellerman 7 books before his first was published." And I was like 50 at the time. I thought, well, I don't know how long I'm going to live, but thanks for the optimistic thought. But I finally started my next book, and I got a rejection from an agent. I don't even know if she's ever got anybody published since that time. And she had some good comments. And so I ended up talking to Carolyn Wheat, and as I'd already started the next book, and I said, "Is this thing worth, should we take another run at this book?" And she said, "Well, send me $500 and I'll let you know." So I did. And she sent me back 12 pages of single space notes. And a couple years later, I sent out again. I actually met an agent at a conference, and she ended up she accepted me after I revised a little bit. And then a few months later, she got me a book deal. But the journey itself from that floppy disk to getting published was about 10 years, which isn't that unusual, I don't think. And from starting to query, it was probably 4 to 5 years, I would say, before I got a yes.
10 years is actually short. Andrea, let me ask you the same question. What about your writer's journey? What did you do before, and are you writing full time? And how about the saga of your first publication?
I'm lucky enough to be writing full time at the moment. But and similarly, my writer's journey took about 10 years as well. I think my first book took me about 10 years to write. And then, of course, you have to write a book annually after that. And, you know, the first book isn't any better than the rest of them. You know, you think, what were you doing for 10 years? But I started writing when I was practicing law in Ishowen, and I was running my own legal practice, and it was a way of, it was a sort of a stress reliever. You know, when I was worried about work, something I was doing at work, in the middle of the night, I would wake up fretting about something. And instead of reaching for the bottle of wine, I would go to the laptop, or the computer as it was at that stage, and write these scenes, which really involved a character who was me to all intents and purposes at the beginning. But she was able to do things that I couldn't do, and she was able to say things to clients and other people that I wouldn't have been able to get away with. And so there was something very cathartic about that. But I never ever thought that those scenes would be published, and they haven't been, actually, because they're a bit libelous probably. But I continued to write her. I began to sort of become interested in this character, and it seemed to be turning into a crime novel. And I loved reading crime. I love reading crime. So I was writing something that I would want to read myself. And I continued writing this one book for on and off for about 10 years, I would say. I moved to Dublin, sold my practice, and started practicing as a barrister. We have a split legal profession in Ireland, or a barrister, and the umbrella term is lawyer. So the barrister is the one who wears the wig and the gown and the tabs, and so that's what I was doing. I moved to Dublin and I was practicing in crime, and wearing the gear, and I had more time when I stopped running my legal practice. I had more time to write, and I started to take it a bit more seriously and do some writing courses, and I started to have some little bit of success in terms of getting shortlisted for competitions, or the Irish Writers' Centre Novel Fair. My first book, the book that took me 10 years to write, I got shortlisted for the Irish Novel Fair, which was an opportunity to meet agents and publishers, a kind of a speed dating, a one-day speed dating, moving from table to table and trying to pitch your book. I was, my first book, sorry, my first book was longlisted for that. So I didn't quite get to the speed dating stage, but my next book, it gave me encouragement to keep writing. And my next book did make it into the novel fair. And I didn't get an agent or a publisher from that. A lot of the agents were still looking at my books by the time I got my London agent. And that was purely from cold emailing using the Writers and Artists yearbook, which we have here. And this is the 2011 edition, which is the one that I was using. And I just sent off my first 3 chapters, checked to see which agents were interested in crime fiction. And eventually I got the email saying, I really liked your 3 chapters. Can I see the full manuscript? And then the, can I give you a call? And then the, will you come over to London next week and meet me? And it was like something out of a movie for me. You know, I flew over and went out for lunch with my now agent. She's been my agent ever since. And she signed me, and then started working on my book with me. And I had a publisher in about 6 months. So that was my journey. Yeah, very traditional, really.
The 2 processes are very similar. A long period of suffering followed by hopefully a fairy tale. Yeah. That's,
very similar. The Writer Fest, was that what it was called?
It was the Irish Writers' Centre. The Irish Writers' Centre run what they call a novel fair.
Okay.
which is for unpublished writers. And I think it's now open to writers from all over the world. So I think there were some Americans in the more recent novel fair. And you send in, I can't remember what the number is, how many pages you've got to send in, or whether it's the first 3 chapters or whatever, but you send in the first chunk of your book, or a chunk of your book. And then if you're selected, you get invited to this day of speed dating.
Yeah.
That's not, I mean, the speed dating is that there's various situations like that at writers conferences in the States, but there's the famous one, and the one that's the biggest, people were talking about before we went on air, I think, Thriller Fest. But as far as I know, Carl, you don't have to be accepted for that. You just got to pay what they want. You just got to pay for the entry.
That's right. So the challenge there is that it's first come, first serve for the agents. So everyone lines up, and if
Right.
you know the really popular agent, you might wait a half an hour, and there's a time limit as to how long you can talk to all agents. So you know some people will go to less well-known agents because they will have opportunities to pitch.
Mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just say that process, and I haven't done Thriller Fest, but I've done situations like that. Is that one thing it does for a writer, especially when you're with your first book and you're kind of trying to figure out exactly perhaps what it's about, is it makes you condense down into a very small number of words or amount of time, you know, what your book's about. It really makes you think about it, which will help you going forward when you're published and giving book talks. But also, if your book's not quite ready, it also may put you in a situation where you're like, oh, this is what I think it's about, but maybe it's not quite there.
Yes. Yeah. I found it very kind of intimidating, you know, in the sense that I did have to face up to the flaws in my book, you know, but the fact that my book had been selected for it was a great boost and gave me encouragement to then go and seek an agent in London. And in fact, that's what I needed, was a London agent.
Very cool.
Well, let's get on to the books themselves. Matt, why don't you tell us about the series and where this one begins?
Okay, Rick Cahill is my protagonist, and way back in the first book, Yesterday's Echo, he has his backstory before the first book even came out. He's arrested. He's a cop in Santa Barbara now. When this book opens, maybe 17 years ago, and his wife was murdered. He was arrested for the murder, never tried, never exonerated. Thought to be the guy who got away with murder. They just have enough evidence for many years. And the book's called Blind Vigils. So the spoiler is it's on the first page. You can't see. Something happened at the end of the last book, which was Lost Tomorrows, which he ended up solving. That was book 6. He ended up solving the situation of his wife. And something happened and he lost his eyesight. And so when this book opens, he's been a private investigator since he was no longer a cop for many years. And he was having his own doubts about that because he lives by a code handed down to him by his father, who was also thought to be a bad cop. Sometimes you have to do what's right, even when the law says it's wrong. And he's starting to question because of some of the decisions he's made and some of the actions he's taken, where innocent people have gotten hurt, or he's tried to do what he thought was the right thing. He's starting to question whether he even knows that kind of right from wrong anymore. So he can't see. His private eye license hasn't lapsed, but he's no private eye. He's actually he's in the best situation of any book in terms of his relationships with people. Surprisingly, he met someone he'd known years before in Santa Barbara in the last book. And they're now a couple, and she has kind of dual citizenship between San Diego and Santa Barbara. And they're living together in San Diego as the book opens. And he's just trying to kind of find his way. What am I going to do now that I'm no longer a PI? It's kind of the push I needed, but I don't really have I don't have a space anymore. I don't have a goal. I don't have a quest. He had a quest for many years. One was to kind of redeem himself for the guilt he felt about his wife's murder. And so every case he would take, it would be a striving for redemption, trying to help people that need the help and trying to redeem himself. And whether he succeeded in that or not, he's now left without that, and he's just kind of floating around, trying to deal with having lost his eyesight only 9 months ago. And his sometime partner, Moira McFarlane, PI, he calls her the best PI he knows. She's smarter than he is. She's doesn't take action off her gut like he does. She's kind of a mellowing influence to him in some ways, if that's possible. And she comes over to his house and says, "I've got a case and I need your help with it." And he's like, "Hey, I don't do that anymore." But it's what they call a domestic case, where asking the private eye to surveil their significant other. And the person happens to be a guy named Turk Muldoon, who Rick used to work for in a restaurant. It used to be his best friend until they had a falling out. And all Moira really wants is for Rick to sit in on this conversation, even though that she has with Turk, even though Rick can't see, she feels he knows him very well, and she could sense, is Turk being honest with me? Because Moira is a little gun shy, or very gun shy, with domestic situations, because the last case she'd found out that the wife was cheating, and the husband who hired her ended up killing the wife and committing suicide. So she doesn't want to be in that situation again. Although she now kind of feels responsible. When somebody wants me to take one of these cases, I have to make sure that the subject of the case, the target, is safe as well. So Rick goes, listens to the conversation, and things get nasty from there. And yeah, it can be read as a standalone. I'm very happy whenever reviewers say that. You get a little bit of the backstory, a little bit of the baggage that Rick has, but it's not going to ruin anything for the earlier books. Although you do know that by the title, it says Blind Vigil, and it's on the first page that he can't see.
Yeah. And I have to say, if as a writer, if you ever want a challenge, try writing eliminating one of the senses, where all you have is the memory of that sense. Really, really hard to do. And Matt did a great job at it.
Well, I got help from Carl, because we were in the writers group at the time, and Carl and everybody else in the group was very helpful in trying to, okay, enough of this, the senses, and you got to move forward with the plot. So, but it was difficult. It was a challenge. And actually, I'll try to be brief. As you know, I was actually Rick's always been in first person. I was writing a third person character because I wasn't sure that a blind PI could be exciting enough to carry this book. The bad guy, this third person bad guy, watching Rick and Moira from afar, and because I didn't think Rick could carry the action. But then after about 100 pages, I stopped writing the third person character and realized I just had to get into Rick. I got into his character, I'd be able to pull it off. So, but it was a good situation, a good lesson for me, and good for me to practice the other bones by writing a third person character. Anyway, that's it.
Good. So Andrea, tell us about your series, how this book fits into the series, and the town of Inishowen.
Yeah, it's a peninsula actually. Inishowen is a peninsula, is the most northerly peninsula in Ireland. But just to get the geography correct. But the series, this is the third one in the series. My protagonist is a solicitor. There's a big surprise, and she runs a practice in Inishowen. She runs the most northerly solicitor's practice in Ireland, which I did. So what my first review said, she didn't have to look too far for her inspiration for her books, so which is true. But Ben O'Keefe, who is my protagonist, is originally from Dublin, and she has a bit like a Matt's Rick Cahill character. She has somebody that she loved was murdered, and this is something which motivates her because she feels guilt for not having done more to prevent it, and it motivates her to become more involved in in her work and in the lives of her clients than she probably should do. So she has sort of run away from the bright lights of the city and lost herself in the wilds of the most northerly peninsula in Ireland, and has set up a legal practice there, and it becomes somewhat of a younger, more reckless Miss Marple type character, I suppose, which is one of the reasons why I'm compared to Agatha Christie in some reviews. It's because there's quite a traditional sort of mystery structure to the way that I write the books, in that there is generally a murder. A body is found near the beginning. We have a very limited cast of suspects. We have an amateur sleuth, and there is usually a solution at the end, and order is restored. But her past comes after her. Life isn't as simple as she thought it would be. It isn't as easy to lose herself in Inishowen. And the third book in the series is where that arc completes, where her past really does come after her in a frightening way.
What I love is that all these characters know each other, and there are no secrets. So the protagonist has a secret affair going on with her boyfriend, and they think no one knows, and everyone knows.
So, yeah, I mean, if you live in a small village in Ireland, you'll know that that's absolutely the case.
Everyone thinks they know everyone else's past, but there's so much they don't know.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there are secrets, and I think that's, I suppose, one of the reasons why a small town lawyer running a small town family practice is a good device for an amateur sleuth, because certainly my experience in running a small town practice was that I knew secrets of people that I was dealing with, and sometimes you would know something that somebody else who came into you probably would be very curious about, but you've got to be incredibly careful about what you disclose. And so I'm portraying the small town and the lives of the participants or the inhabitants of the small town through the prism of the small town solicitor as a sort of keeper of secrets, almost like the local priest, because there is very little that she can do to disclose things, and sometimes what she knows places some degree of responsibility on her to do something about something which has happened, because nobody else knows what she knows, and she can't disclose it. So I liked that sort of difficulty that she was put in, that kind of moral dilemma, you know.
Right. We have one question from the chat. Do you want to read that, Maddie?
Maddie Margarita.
Sure. Yes, I'm here. Okay, this is for both Andrea and Matt. Did you both intend to write a series when you wrote your first book? And if so, how did you go about building a character who is able to support future books, multiple future books?
Andrea,
You want to go first, Matt?
Me or you?
You.
All right. Don't copy. No, I didn't really know in the very early stages of writing what became the first book, Yesterday's Echo. I didn't really know I was writing a series. I'd studied English in college, which will help you get a job in the restaurant business and then later in golf if you want. But I thought I was going to be a novelist. I remember starting a really bad, angsty novel when I graduated from college, and then I realized I had to actually get a job. And at that point, I didn't know how to write and work a day job at the same time. But but I had this. I made the mistake of telling people that I wanted to be a writer. I was going to be a writer. I would go from job to job as opposed to career because I had the out. I was going to be a writer, but I wasn't writing, of course. I've said this before, but it's a quick side note. So when you're doing this, when you're telling people you're a writer and then you finally write what you thought was a book and it's that first draft, don't let anybody outside your writers group see it. But I thought, I had the book. I went to Kinko's, that's how long ago it was. And I had it printed out, and people at work, because I had a big mouth, knew I was a writer and they'd want to see it. And so I give it to them. This was a first draft of a first book. So you can imagine how awful it was. And this was, I don't know, 15 years ago, or longer, 20 probably. So every time that one of my new book comes out, I always think about these people may see that the note in the newspaper that Matt Coyle will be doing a book signing, blah, blah, blah. And I think about them, they probably pull out that first draft of the first book and they go, this guy can't write. I read his book. His first book was terrible. But point being that I had to finish a book because that was my life's goal. And if I didn't do it, I'd be a complete failure. So that was my main goal, to write this book when I finally sat down and started doing it. But midway through, I realized that there was so much about this character, Rick Cahill, I didn't know that I wanted to explore. With each revision, and there were quite a few revisions, he got darker and more interesting to me, further away from my own personal story, thank God. And I would say revision 2 or 3, I definitely knew. I knew I wanted to be writing a series. That I know someone would want to buy more than one book, if that. I did not know. In terms of making it able to support future books, it's not something I really thought about. And it's not something I think about now. I wish I were more organized, but I'm not. I've learned with difficulty to trust the process. But my main goal for every book is the Rick subplot. That's the first thing that comes to me. What's going on in his personal life? And there's always something that he's trying to overcome, deal with. And is there a case he can take that will intertwine those and make that personal situation more difficult? Or if not, there doesn't have to be some sort of connection, just that it has to make his life more difficult. And then I try to find something interesting I like to write about in terms of the story itself. But I never did a character arc or anything like that, thinking about Rick, but I do see the changes along the way. They've been subtle, and it's sort of been a roller coaster for him, where he goes, and I think maybe some people are like that. Maybe I am. Kind of back and forth a little bit, up and down, where he's making progress, and then he falls back to his normal devices. So it's not something I gave a lot of thought about, but I'm really happy that I did make a series out of it.
Does your main character follow a similar pattern, Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, I think what allowed it to develop as a series was Ben O'Keefe's past. That there was, while I completed the individual mystery in book 1 and book 2, at the end of each, there is an unfinished element to her story and her backstory. And the reader knows that she is in peril in some way, and that she is still in peril at the end of book 2. There is an element of completion at the end of book 3. It's almost as if that, that initial arc is completed, and there are more things to come then in book 4 in Grey's Bridge. But I think that's what turned it into a series. Not dissimilar to Matt, that there was more that I needed to know about Ben O'Keefe, and I needed to know more about her backstory and where, and that was unfinished. That there was a danger there in her background which hadn't been resolved. But I had an odd sort of journey to publication, and not something that I mentioned in the previous question actually, but I wrote the first book that I had published was the second book that I wrote. So my first book which was the one that got longlisted for the Novel Fair in the Irish Writers' Centre, was Treacherous Strand, which is the second one that was published, and it was the book that I wrote secondly, which was Death at Whitewater Church, which is my first book that was published. That's the one that got me an agent and a publisher. And so I had this kind of very raggedy, not very good draft of Treacherous Strand in my back pocket when I got my publishing deal, which was great. It meant that I didn't have to start from scratch with a second book, but it also meant that I was already on my road to writing a series.
Right. So do you outline your books, Andrea, or do you write for the seat of the
I'm a
pants?
complete pantser. Yeah, absolutely. I have no idea where the book is going to go when I start it, and it is usually by the time I get to my third draft that I have any kind of an idea who the killer is.
But so I guess, but by the time you finish the book, you have an idea for what the conflict will be in the next book.
Yes, I do. Well, I know what the question I have to answer is at the end of the book.
Right.
I know what the question I will have to answer with regard to Ben's story. I know what question I have to answer in the next book, but I don't know what the answer is.
Wow, similar to you, Matt.
Right. Insanity.
Yes. Oh, completely. It's an absolutely crazy way to write a book. But he and I have discussed this before, and it's absolutely bonkers. I don't know how we've managed to write so many books with this process.
Blind faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm looking at the chat, and I see Cheryl Garrett has a really good question where she says, would you suggest a larger publisher and agent or work with a small publisher? And I have an answer for this. And I think that when everybody's getting started, they just, well, if I could just get an agent. Well, the agent writer relationship is kind of, it's there's loyalty involved that can be very long standing, and it's something you've been at it for such a long time with so many rejections. It's hard to not say yes when someone else says yes, but something you really have to consider, and something I'll mention Carolyn Weed again, that she always told her prospective writers is, when you're starting to query, make a list of A, B, and C agents and go for the A's first. Find out who agents your favorite authors, who agents books that are similar to what you're writing. And you can do this on Publishers Marketplace online. And you got to shoot for them, because they're going to get you the best shot at a big publisher. And yes, you want to get a big publisher, because if you're writing a series, it's hard to take that series to a new publisher in the middle. If you're hoping to break out, unless you have broken out, no new large publisher is going to take on your backlist of 5 books when you're writing book 6. And yes, they like book 6. We're going to buy it because all the sales will go to them after someone reads book 6 first and goes back through 1 through 5. So you have to shoot for the stars. You have to realize that you're competing with everybody out there. You're competing with Michael Connelly for bookshelf space. And it's funny, the mystery community is so giving and helping each other, and we don't really think of it as competition, but in reality it's competition for shelf space. And so you have to think about, so when someone goes to a bookstore, they're not going, I'm going to try someone's first novel. Well, no, you have to be, what you put out has to be on a level with other writers. So that's something you have to consider when you're revising. Anyway, that's my soapbox.
Oh, good. So Matt, do you have a insightful question for Andrea? Maybe something embarrassing that you can't answer very well.
I was trying to be nice. I don't know. It may not be insightful, but I met Andrea at BoucherCon St. Petersburg, how many years ago it was, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And she just got a book deal with Ocean View, my publisher, a domestic, a U.S. book deal. And I want to ask her maybe 2 things. First of all, what was that process like? And I know there's I can't think of it, the big mystery convention in England every year, but did you see any differences between BoucherCon and that big one in England that you know I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the Theakston's Old Peculiar in Harrogate. Is that
No,
the one
I'm
you're
talking
talking
about
about?
something else. Anyway, doesn't matter.
That's
Just make the correlation.
Crime Fest, is it?
That's the one. Yeah.
Yes, Crime Fest. Crime Fest is quite similar to BoucherCon, although it's in a kind of a conference style. Although it would be not to the same scale, you know, at all. I was blown away by the number of people at BoucherCon. I don't think I expected anything quite so huge, you know, and the queues of people going down the corridors and, you know, but I had a ball. It was great. I had a great time there. So Crime Fest is similar in the way that it's sort of set up, in that it's there are panels. It's quite like a conference. There are lots of other festivals, both in the UK and Ireland, which are different, which feel different. But the other question you were asking me,
Well, just the experience of being published in the US, and is that different from what you go through in the UK?
Well, the process. Oh yes, the process by which I ended up published by Ocean View. My publishers in the UK are big. They're Little Brown UK, so they're part of Hachette Worldwide, and they would be. So I mean, I was delighted. You know, I'm obviously thrilled to be published by Little Brown in the UK, but it's a very different type of publisher to Ocean View, because there's a scale element to it, and you're a sort of a very small cog in a very large operation if you're published by a very large publisher, and you get much more personal attention, generally speaking, if you are published by a smaller publisher. There are advantages and disadvantages, I think. You know, I've got a very large publisher in the UK and a smaller publisher in the US, and I see advantages on both sides. I don't think it's as simple as you're far better off if you're with a larger publisher, or you get personal attention with a smaller one. There are definitely advantages on both sides, and I very much like both of my publishers, on both sides of the pond. I think I was very lucky. I am very lucky with my agents. I did what you did, which is that I approached and submitted to my first choices, and then moved on a little bit. And my agents are probably somewhere in the middle. You know, I was really interested in them. But I'm very lucky because they have an office in Paris and they have an office in New York. So my main agent is based in London, and she's the one I'm in touch with all of the time. But if I'm dealing with anything in the States, I'm dealing with my agent in New York. So that makes them sound like they're huge. They're a boutique agency who have offices in different parts of the world, but that's a big advantage, having that. So I have a kind of a European reach and an American reach and a London reach, and that's how I ended up with an American publisher separate from my UK publisher. And I like that. You know, that gives me it gives me different insight into the way things work on both sides of the pond as well, you know.
Right. Right. So Maddie, we have a few more questions in the chat.
Okay, yeah. So one is, do US readers and European readers have different expectations and tastes, in your opinions?
Well, the one thing that I have noticed is that I get told off in American reviews for using God or Jesus, or
Really?
and that does not happen in Ireland or in the UK. I've had quite a few reviews online where people have said, yeah, I really liked this book, but I just wish she didn't have to use the Lord's name in vain, or, you know, and, you know, unfortunately, that's the way Irish people speak, you know, they just do. And in order for me to be authentic in the way that I'm writing these books, I've got to write the voices of the people who live there. And, you know, so that's one huge difference, that took me by surprise, I have to say. I just didn't expect it. And then as soon as I said it to other writers who were published in the US, they all said, "Oh yeah, me too." And I was surprised by it, you know, as well. So that's the main difference, really. Other than that, you know, people, Americans seem to like crime as much as the Irish and the UK readers do. It's it and love talking about it, and, you know, and there are some wonderful US crime writers and UK and Irish crime writers. There's a big Irish crime writing is doing very well at the moment, and it seems to be doing well in the US as well, which is great, you know.
So Matt, can you talk to that a little bit? I mean, how much interaction have you had, or are your books primarily here in the US, or are you attempting to get them a broader distribution?
Are you trying to make me feel bad?
No, I promise.
Well, you know, the publisher, I actually had a Turkish book deal that never went through, so that was exciting. Just to touch on what Andrea was saying, I think what happens, is when your book goes on sale for like an Amazon Kindle or something at a very low price, you get a lot of people that will dabble. You'll get some new readers, and that's a good thing. But you'll also get some readers who are, you know, I'm going to try it for $1.99 or what have you. And they'll be shocked that there were guns and swear words in a hard-boiled mystery. So you get all those new readers, but you also get some crappy Goodreads reviews. So that's all part of it. But yeah, I think most, you know, you get all kinds, but maybe we are a little more offended by the use of God, although it's usually the F word that gets me in trouble.
Good to know. Okay, there's another question here from Paula. Paula wants to know, how much help with marketing do you get from your publisher, if any? I think that's for both of you.
Well, I'll jump on that. It varies. One thing Ocean View does for a small publisher is they do a very good job of pre-pub before your book is published. They do a job getting reviews, things like that. In terms of doing my book signings, I think I've done the hundreds of book signings I've done. I think that only the publisher's gotten 2 for me. I mean, that's my job. I do it. I don't know. We'll find out what Andrea thinks and how it works for her. But I think in the US, even if you're a mid-list with in a big house, you're a mid-list publisher in a big house, you're gonna have to do a lot of marketing yourself. It's like 80% goes to 20% top earners, top sellers. So they do help you. And I think the more you interact with your publisher, the more help you're going to get, because you're showing them that you're invested and you're willing to, you know, you go to conferences, you spend money, you do these certain things. They're going to help you because they see that there's some bang for the buck, and plus they just appreciate somebody who wants to get out there and work hard for their own career.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with Ocean View has been brilliant in terms of the marketing and the reviews that you get before publication and all of that. And that, you know, I suppose that's been a lot stronger from Ocean View than it has been from my very large publishers in the UK, who have lots and lots of multi-million selling authors who they are spending their marketing budget on, and that's just the reality of it. But yeah, you do have to do a lot of it yourself. I mean, and that's just the reality of it as well. I do get quite a bit of help from there's a Hachette office in Dublin, and so when the book comes out on this side of the water, the book comes out in Ireland initially, and then comes out 6 months later in the UK. And so when my book comes out in Ireland, the Irish office of Hachette will organize book signings for me and take me around, and we go out for lunch, and that's all. That's, you know, that's great. So I get that kind of personal level of assistance with marketing from the Dublin side of things. You know, probably if I was living in London, I might get it over there, you know, but I don't live there. So but yeah, I mean, you certainly do get marketing assistance, and you get quite a bit of marketing support, and you do have to do quite a bit of it yourself as well. So
One thing a bigger publisher is going to get you that you just can't get with a small publisher is distribution. I mean, maybe a lot of those books are going to come back, but you're there, and all the Barnes and Nobles, you're there on the shelf. So that's one thing a small publisher can't always get you.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Barbara has a process question. How deeply did you know your main character before you began? And do you do personality profiles for your main characters?
I think Andrea should go with that one first.
Yeah. Yeah, my main character was me when I began, really. That changed, but certainly when I was writing her initially, she really was nothing more than a kind of braver or more reckless version of me. She ran the most northerly solicitor's practice in Ireland, and you know, she certainly had, there were common denominators there. I had an odd kind of experience when I was writing her initially. I was writing her in the third person, and she was very much me. And I wasn't happy with that. And I was trying to figure out how I could get her to detach herself from me. And in a writer's group I was in, somebody suggested that I try and write her in the first person. And I thought, well, surely that's going to make her even closer to me. You know, how's that going to work? And I did, and weirdly, and I still don't know why it happened, but she did. She detached herself from me, and I managed to develop a backstory for her that wasn't mine, and characteristics that weren't mine, and she became not me anymore. So she, I think for a lot of people when they start writing, they are writing autobiographically, and I certainly was, and it took me a while to manage to wrench that story away from my life, you know, and turn it into proper fiction. But that was the process. That was the sort of turning point for me, by which I managed to turn her into a character and not me any longer.
That's so unusual. It's the first time I've ever heard that, someone getting more distance from the character by going from third to first.
I know. I have no idea why that happened. Not a clue. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense.
I'll answer the question. I had a huge character arc I did for years before I wrote the book. I had everything figured out, pages and pages, volumes and volumes, but actually I didn't. I had no clue. I still don't really. When I don't, every year I say, you've got to do the Bible. You've got to do the Bible of what everybody, where they're from, what they look like, what their hair color is, their eye, you know, what's their relationship to who and who. And I never do. Because I'm not that organized. One thing that the further you go in the writing career, the more responsibilities you have outside of your own writing. You're asked to do things, and that takes up some of your time. It's not an excuse. I certainly could sacrifice something else for writing a Bible. So very often I have to go back and open a particular book, or I got to go to the PDF file I have of book one and like search for, you know, a character and see exactly when I introduce them and where they're from, what have you. I wish I did it. It's a good idea to do it, but you know, the character, your protagonists and your main characters are going to evolve. I don't think you're going to, even if you're an outliner and you do write the character arcs and everything, you're just going to learn more about the character as you go. You're going to learn more backstory about the character as you go. So you know, that's a good idea to do because it will focus you on what you want, who you want your character to be, but it's going to expand. But you know, writing's a lot easier, I think, if you're organized, but I've tried it and it doesn't work for me. So it's just
Yeah.
do it this way.
Yeah, and I'm exactly the same actually in terms of the characters other than my protagonist. I don't write character bios, or I don't do anything in advance. You know, I introduce them, they walk on stage, and I get to know them as I write them. Having said that, I do have a sort of a paragraph for each one as I probably in draft 3 of the book. I'm starting to sort of try and take notes as to a little bit about the characters, but it's very organic. They sort of germinate as I write them and become more real to me as I write them, which is absolutely chaotic way of writing, but Matt does it as well.
Yeah, that's the chaotic, messy. You termed it with it, which is the new term for organic. It makes it sound so much better.
I know.
Yeah.
Fresher.
Well, here's a question from Maddie, so I will read it. What is the one thing you wish someone would have told when you started writing?
Possibly that it's hard work, that it requires discipline, and that's probably the hardest part of it. I think I never thought that I would not want to write if I was allowed to write as a career. It would never have occurred to me, you know, having practiced law for all of those years. And if somebody told me you're going to be writing full time and you'll be trying to avoid the laptop, that I wouldn't have believed that. That it requires just as much discipline as any other job.
I actually am glad no one told me how difficult. I don't think there is a question that I wish someone would have asked me. Maybe, no, there isn't one, because I think it would have made it too difficult. If you would know that it would take you 10 years to get published, you know, and you'd say maybe to yourself, no, I'm going to break the rule. And then after 3 years you're not published, maybe you wouldn't continue to go. Although maybe you do find that it's something you need to do. It's inside you need to get out. But I quit drinking 36 years ago. And I didn't intend to quit drinking. I didn't go to AA or anything. Probably should have. But but I do believe in the AA one day at a time. And that's the way I was going to quit drinking for a few weeks. And then once I got to that state, a few weeks. And I think that if you try to take the whole enchilada, and people tell you, well, you know, it takes most people 10 to 15 years to get published, and you're gonna have to write when you're your day job, and once you get published, you're still gonna have to write when you have a day job for many years. Maybe the first few obstacles you go, hey, this just ain't worth it. I don't know if I can do that. It's too big an enchilada. So I'm probably glad I didn't know anything going in. Maybe I wouldn't have continued to push through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So we're running up against our time limit here. So do either of you have any last words you'd like your readers to know about and other authors?
Just thanks for having us. It's good to see everybody again. I can't wait till when my book comes out in November. I'm hopeful that we'll be in bookstores, actually seeing people face to face. Thanks for all you guys do. It's really appreciated. It's been a really hard year for everybody, bookstores included, and we really appreciate this. And for writers, you got to write. It's hard. It's awful. You got to write when it's easy. You got to write when it's hard. You got to write, especially when you don't want to.
Yeah, I think tenacity is the most important talent you can have.
It really is for everything.
Yeah, definitely. And there are the bookshelves. All of the bookshelves in our bookshops are filled with authors who were rejected many, many, many times before they got published. And those who are published are those who had that tenacity, who just stuck at it. And, if one book that you write doesn't work, doesn't get a publisher, start writing the next one, And I mean, I think that was the best advice that I was ever given. And I certainly wouldn't be published had I not started writing the next one, because it was the second book that got me an agent and a publisher. And also thank you very much for inviting me. It's been lovely to chat to everybody from dark Dublin.
Well,
It's
we
5
thank
after
you
midnight
very
where
much.
Andrea is, by the way.
What's that?
It's 5 after midnight where Andrea is, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm still
Well,
awake.
we thank you both. Really appreciate this. This was a lot of fun, and I think we got a lot of insight from this. And I would say buy both these books.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.